The death of George Floyd was a modern-day lynching, and I am outraged. His death and countless other black men and women who've died at the hands of police. As a father, husband, and fellow human, I cannot imagine the grief and the suffering of his family and so many other families around this community and this country. I'm furious that in 2020, we're fighting the same battles for the same causes that our parents and grandparents marched and in some cases died for 50 years ago. I've been very clear that I believe racism exists in every facet of our culture. It's not unique to Columbus. Unfortunately, it's embedded in our culture as a nation. There are elements that deny racism exists, including some within the Division of Police. Some in our community feel protected, while others feel policed. There are people with the division who aren't interested in change and who will seek to fight reform. But I know racism exists, and police brutality is a manifestation of that racism. We give our police officers an incredible amount of power. I don't have, the governor does not have, and the president does not have the power to stop, detain, question, arrest, and ultimately use lethal force the way that officers do. That takes an incredible amount of responsibility, and why we hold our officers to a higher standard. We know that racism exists and that police brutality against black and brown people exists. Consider this. An incompetent doctor could face malpractice suits or lose their license. An incompetent office worker gets fired. An unethical attorney gets disbarred. But at the hands of a racist, rogue police officer, people die. I am fighting to deal with it head on, and I will not accept the status quo. I've been fighting for police reform since day one of my administration, implementing body-worn cameras for police officers, committed to increase the diversity of police by 50%, and advanced extensive recruitment strategies. Our last 3 police classes have been the most diverse and highest scoring in a decade. We formed the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy to address crime not just with law enforcement, but with Columbus Public Health and the Department of Neighborhoods. We've required more of our officers to undergo crisis intervention training. We've received the recommendations on reform from the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission and Matrix Consulting, an independent third-party firm who helped us study and offer reforms for the Columbus Division of Police. These are all steps in the right direction, but we know there is much, much more to do. Like you, I've seen images and videos over the last weeks that disturb me, including the pepper spraying of nonviolent activists, media, and elected officials. Let me be clear. Some of these images and videos are not acceptable and don't live up to my expectations or the community's expectations. And we will hold folks accountable. My conversations with our neighbors, activists, and other elected leaders have informed our response. In every decision I make as we work to navigate these unprecedented times, we know that we'll get through this together, stronger and better for it. But it will be painful. It will be messy. It will be one of the greatest challenges our community has ever faced. But we are the people of Columbus, and we can get this right. Over the years, I've talked to a lot of people from different neighborhoods all over the community about what they want and what they need from their city. I heard residents say they felt left out of the prosperity of Columbus, and they told me my job as mayor is to help close that divide and bring equity to the entire community. Those opinions are what led now to my top priorities, our equity agenda, an agenda that calls out racism and discrimination where it exists, and my plans to address it. Well, what does that mean? It means reducing infant mortality by making sure Black babies reach their first birthday and thrive in their earliest years of life. It means ensuring access to high-quality pre-K and kindergarten readiness, becoming a national leader, regardless of your zip code. It means working to reduce evictions where we know Black mothers and Black families are disproportionately impacted, and increasing access to affordable housing throughout the community. It means creating more opportunities for Black-owned, women, businesses to have equal access to city contracts. It means connecting residents to good-paying careers in the trades. And it means ensuring our residents feel safe wherever they go, including their interactions with police. Because there is no greater inequity than the brutality that can happen at the hands of a police officer. 2020 has been a year like none other we've ever seen. A pandemic that caused a health crisis, a human service crisis, an economic crisis, plus civil unrest. But with its unprecedented challenges, I see opportunity. I'm inspired by the urgent voices that have been raised, the emergence of new leaders seeking justice, change, and reform in our community, young people, and the outcry for change. Real talk, real change, not just talking and studying and analyzing, but acting, moving with a sense of urgency, purpose, progress. I want to thank all the individuals and groups who made time to meet with me over the last couple of weeks. Sometimes difficult and painful, personal conversations. But they've been so meaningful, and I'm grateful for all that we have met and talked with. Students, activists, parents, officers, members of the LGBTQ community, faith and business leaders. They've all helped to lead and guide the immediate steps that we've already taken in recent weeks. We signed on to former President Barack Obama's mayoral pledge and committed to review, engage, report, and reform common sense limits on police use of force. I signed an executive order that implements landmark reform to mandate independent, third-party investigations by the Bureau of Criminal Investigations into police-involved deaths. I directed Chief Quinlan to stop using tear gas and pepper spray to disperse nonviolent, non-aggressive crowds. We seated the Chief's Advisory Panel to guide the work of Chief Quinlan in raising our standards of policies and procedures within the department to meet the community's expectations. And we signed on to 8 Can't Wait, committing to 8 data-driven reforms to instill more restrictive use of force policies within the Division of Police. I committed to setting up a civilian review board with meaningful oversight authority by the end of the year. And we will hire an independent investigator to review the city's overall response to protests since the end of May. I will take more action in the coming days and weeks. We must continue to build on the already overwhelming community support to enact change that is significant, substantial, and swift. We're working now to continue to implement the changes by recommendations by the Safety Advisory Commission and the Matrix Report for better recruiting, training, and accountability for police officers. And we will soon have a public-facing tracking system so residents can see the progress we're making at any time, in real time, on those recommendations and changes. We've made some missteps, too. I've made them. The Division of Police have made them. Progress is messy. It's challenging. It's frustrating. But progress can only be made when we own our mistakes and our missteps. We acknowledge them. And we correct course and own the change, reform, and justice that the community deserves. I set up a hotline outside the chain of command of police to investigate community complaints. All of the complaints are being reviewed by the Department of Public Safety and a faith leader. For the first time in the city's history, we will hire an independent law firm to investigate the complaints that may deserve administrative discipline, and a separate law enforcement entity outside the Columbus Division of Police to review those complaints that may demand criminal charges. Body-worn cameras have been a top priority of mine since my run for mayor back in 2015. Body-worn cameras have turned out to be an excellent tool in holding the police and the community accountable. But the protests of the last few weeks showed their limitations. We are correcting this so that cameras will always be worn as intended. I know how important the Civilian Review Board is to the community. It is one of the most important reforms that we're seeking to make. We will have a work group formed next week to shape our review board. And I'm calling on the FOP to be part of the process the community demands. But with or without you, the Civilian Review Board will be seated by the end of the year. We're on a path to move from 20th century law enforcement to 21st century community policing, from an old model of policing to a new model that protects and serves every resident. And we're creating a city that fights racism and discrimination and builds equity. This is not a solo journey. Each and every one of us have a role to play. And I'm calling on you to step up. To our police officers, many of you entered this profession to protect and serve. Many of you work tirelessly every day to do just that and to build meaningful relationships with our residents. To those officers, keep serving admirably. But if you see other officers using excessive force or outdated training models, intervene immediately on behalf of the people of Columbus. To those officers who do not serve our community in the ways we expect, we do not have room for you in the Columbus Division of Police, and you will be held accountable. To the FOP, be part of the solution. Be part of the reform our community is demanding, starting by helping with the formation of a Civilian Review Board. The entire community has rallied around this reform. Faith leaders from all backgrounds and experiences, CEOs of companies, leaders in higher education, people from all walks of life are demanding independence, oversight, and accountability. And so let me be very clear to the FOP. You're either with us or you're against the community. I urge you to join us, or the community will hold you accountable. To other elected officials at the federal, state, and local level, change at all levels is needed. Work with me to make change. To young people, keep lifting your voices in the classroom, in your neighborhood, and even at the ballot box. Register to vote and exercise your vote for change, reform, and justice. To the media, keep reporting and cover stories from all sides. To the community, join with me in calling for change with police policies and rooting out the voices within who want to maintain the status quo. President Barack Obama said, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek." Progress is a journey, not a destination. I urge you, I ask you, I implore you to join me on this journey. It will be difficult. It will be complicated. It will be messy. Mistakes will be made. But if we seek together change, truth, justice, and reform, the entire city and all of our neighbors will be safer for it. We're at a crossroads, and the path we take is up to us.